Hi everybody, I'm Dan Wells. I write horror, fantasy, and science fiction, and I talk about games on the internet. Today I'm going to talk about 7th Sea. I love the 7th Sea role-playing game. I've talked about it a couple of times before, 3 times before actually. I think it's a wonderful game. I am currently running a campaign of it and enjoying every second. And so today we're going to talk about Nations of Theah, Volume 2. There are 2 Nations of Theah books. Volume 1 talks about Western Theah, Castile, Montaigne, Avalon, and Vestin Menevinyar. Now, if you know the world of Theah, if you know the world of 7th Sea, you know that it is essentially just fake magical Europe. And that those 3, Castile is Spain, Montaigne is France, Avalon is England, Vestin Menevinyar is Denmark, I guess? Denmark and Norway combined into one. Volume 2, which in many ways I like even more, is Eastern Europe, fake Eastern Europe. And so we have here Eisen, which is, fake Germany, infested by monsters and horrors and, haunted forests and ghosts and vampires and werewolves and stuff. Really neat stuff. They have the Sarmatian Commonwealth, which is like Poland and Lithuania, and it is this very intriguing kind of political democratic paradise with a really cool magic system about what they call dievas, which are these spirits that you can make deals with and bind them to you and gain their powers, but at the risk of giving more power to this horrible monster. There is Usura, which is Russia, and to an extent also kind of sort of Hungary. Um, and they have this really interesting system of kind of ancient spirits or gods. There is Matushka, who is kind of Baba Yaga-ish, and she's this old grandmother who wants to teach people to be better people, but she is very harsh in her lessons. But if you do what she tells you to do, you can gain awesome powers. There is also a person named Tura, who's like the old grandfather, who is afraid of Matushka, but he also opposes her methods. And so he also is going to teach you things, but in a very different way, and he can give you very different powers. So there's Russia. The Russia powers are also the ones, Usura, they're the ones that have the power where you can turn into a bear. So they're my favorite ones. And then last of all, there is vodachi, which is kind of like Italy or Venice, and it has the power of the strega, which is the fate thing. And vodachi, in many ways, is the most interesting and the most problematic and the trickiest to use, and we'll get to them eventually. But first, let's have a look at the book. So, here in 7th Sea, 2nd edition, let's have a look at Eisen, okay? So there's all our awesome monsters, and here's all the awesome people who are going to fight them. So the War of the Cross, which was this big, kind of sort of like the 30 Years' War, sort of. It was this massive religious war that was fought all across Theah, and it really kind of devastated a lot of the nations. None more so than Eisen. They were absolutely obliterated by the war. Also, as a result of the war, monsters have risen up, and the country is just absolutely infested with them. And so the people who live there grow up fighting monsters. And by the time that they become young teenagers, they are already skilled at avoiding and fighting off these horrible monsters. And so they don't have as much, they don't stand on ceremony in the way that like Castile or Montaigne or Vodachi will, because they don't have time for it. They are too busy fighting for survival. So let's take a look at Eisen. What every one of these does, what every chapter, there's a chapter for each of the 4 nations, they will all start with kind of a basic overview. What is Eisen like? Here's a little map of it, and kind of goes through. And then it talks about important people in Eisen, which is not only groups like the Eisenfürsten, but also people like Nicholas Trega. And it goes through and it talks about all these people and who they are. The Eisenfürsten are like the leaders, kind of like the princes or the dukes or the whatever that run the country. In many ways, this is a pretty brutal feudal system because the actual leadership of Eisen has completely fallen apart because of the war and because of the monsters. And so, in a very might makes right kind of scenario, the survivors grouped together into, if I remember correctly, 7 different groups. And each of these groups is just, I'm in charge because I was able to rally enough people together and defend them from the monsters, and they made me in charge. And so that's who runs the country now, are these, I think, 7 people who just were strong enough to do it. And so it talks about all these people, and it gives descriptions of all of the major players, and then it starts talking about other people like the Drachenblut, which are an order of knights that fight dragons and monsters, the Iron Guard, and then it goes into specifics. I love these that have the portraying. So who is Perchta, and how do you actually portray Perchta? Who is Kevistov Two Stripes Jack Braun? Well, he's clearly some kind of a sailor or pirate or something. And, there's a huge description of him. And then there's how to portray them. And then there's story hooks for them. And you get that with all of these really cool people. Rosamund Roth, if I remember correctly, she's the one who is running the Drachenblut. Yes, leader and commander of the Drachenblut. And so if you want to interact with them in any way, well, here's Rosamund Roth. And here's how you as a game master can portray her. And then here's a couple of story hooks that will help you get into the story. So anyway, all of this section, then it goes into, every chapter talks about how the secret societies of Theah, and there are many, how do they all apply to Eisen? So the Explorer Society, it's very common, it's all over Theah. What is it like in Eisen specifically? Same with Relasiare and Sophia's Daughters, which are vodachi groups. The Brotherhood of the Coast is like a Vestin pirate thing. And then it's going to say, in each case, it's going to give us a new one. Here it is, the Kinder von Morgen, which I think they call this the, they translate this as Children of the Morning. Yeah, Children of Tomorrow. Children of the Morning would be a better German translation, but yes, that's what it is. And so it's a brand new one to add into your game if you need a new secret society. And there's one of those for every chapter in every group. Then it talks about places and has really interesting descriptions of places. And every one of these descriptions is based on, it's always conscious that it's a game, right? It's describing a really interesting world, and that's fun, and it's fun to read, but it is also always aware, how are you going to use this in a game? How are you going to actually incorporate this location into your campaign or your scenario or whatever? And so, Freiburg is this huge city that kind of grew up in the middle of nowhere, that carved itself out in the heart of monster-infested Eisen. What is it like? What is it like to live there? What are the different parts of it? And then it goes through all of that, and it has this for everything. It talks about the huge forest, and because it's Eisen, it's a scary forest that is full of monsters. Then there is a different forest. There's Angenehmewald, which is a kind of the nice, happy forest. And this is something you'll actually see several times. Usura has the same thing. There's the scary forest, and then there's the nice forest. The haunted forest, and the enchanted forest. And so there's different opportunities, and if regardless of which kind of forest you need, Eisen has it. So hooray for that. So then we talk about all of here's the Drachenblut fortress. So if you want to get involved with the Drachenblut, this kind of noble order of knights that have taken it upon themselves to rid Eisen of all these monsters, here you go. And it describes what that whole thing is like. There is what is the one in particular that I wanted to show you? Here we go. Gottkirchen and Rücken Island. Rücken, actually. I just trilled my Spanish R instead of a nice throaty German R. Anyway, this is the vampire-infested island that is off the coast of the North Sea. And there's a really neat story behind it, and there's some really cool adventure opportunities here. I dig this island quite a bit. It's kind of the one place in Eisen where the people have accepted the monsters because the monsters keep them safe. Very vampiric in that way. But, they're still held in thrall to monsters. And anyway, it's going to be bad news for everybody. So let's, and then, okay, after it talks about all the locations, then it's going to talk about sorcery. And like I said, every chapter does this. In Eisen, that is Hexenverk. And Hexenverk is necromancy, sort of. It is a kind of sorcery that applies very specifically to death and undeath. And it allows you to basically create unguents or potions out of undead flesh and monster flesh and use them to do cool stuff. Like making corpses talk, or Wraithwalk, which lets you leave your body and walk around as a spirit. Do all kinds of neat things. So there's a big description of what it's like, how it works, how it fits into the culture. Are people going to immediately shun you when they see you using this sorcery? Or are they going to cheer for you because you're amazing? One of the things that I love about the 7th Sea world and the 7th Sea system is that every nation has its own kind of sorcery. Some of them actually have 2 kinds of sorcery, like Usura, but they're different. They fit into their culture in very specific ways. The people of Eisen will react to Hexenverk in one very specific way that is different than, say, the people of Vodachi react to their Strega, which is their form of sorcery. Everyone reacts to the sorcery differently. And people from other countries are going to react to your sorcery differently. So it's not just, oh, all magic users are the same. Each kind of magic is very specific, very flavorful, and has a very specific cultural connotation as well, which I love that they did all of that storytelling and that they found ways to make this really specific and interesting. So hooray for that. So yay, there's a couple of new powers that you can do. Here's some major unguents that you didn't have access to before and some minor ones. Then every chapter is also going to get into dueling, because dueling is a big part of the world. And so here's a quick description of what it is like, and then there is a new kind of dueling for, here we go. In Eisen, their new kind of dueling is called Kummerholt, and then here's their style bonus that they can do. They can do this death knell thing. So, yay! And then every chapter also talks about the legends, the magic, the fairy tales, the weird mythological things that are going on in the background. With Eisen, that is all spooky haunted stuff, right? So there's zombies, there's revenants, there's specific ones. Here we talk about the vampires. There's werewolves in here. There's Grundylow is a thing. There was one that I wanted to show. Let me see if I can find it. Nope. I think it was probably the Weise Frauen. But anyway, they're neat. So that's what every chapter has. Every chapter has descriptions of people. Every chapter has descriptions of places. You know, a detailed look at their sorcery, new spells, new types of dueling, all of that stuff. Okay? So let's give you a really quick look then at the other 3 nations. So Sarmatian Commonwealth. What really stands out to me here, and what you get in this book that you don't get in the others, first of all, there's a pronunciation guide, because Polish and Lithuanian are not familiar to most of us, unless you're Polish background, which you totally might have. Anyway, so what happened in the Sarmatian Commonwealth is it's 2 different kind of countries that combined into a single group, and they were ruled by a senate of powerful nobles that were trying to take over the world. And then the king, Stanislaw, he passed a law against the will of the nobles that was called the Golden Liberty, that granted every single person in the country, from the poorest to the richest, noble status. And so suddenly it is a full-bore democracy where everybody in the country gets a vote. That is really cool, and it's very different from everybody else, and it's actually kind of historically accurate to the, you know, Polish-Lithuanian Union. But it's also the kind of thing that creates a lot of political unrest if you used to have more power than you did before the king did his dumb thing. So there's a lot of really interesting political machinations going on behind the scenes. And in particular, the royal family is fascinating. And there are a lot of adventure hooks here with, let's see, there's the king, King Stanislaw the First, and he has a son and an estranged wife and I don't know if she's a new wife or just a mistress. Anyway, there's a lot of really interesting things going on in there. There's his son, Domenica Vespucci. Is she? She's not the wife. The wife is there it is, Malgorzata Domagala. Again, I'm pronouncing this with a super Spanish accent, and I apologize. She's kind of the villain, but also kind of not a villain. She's definitely a villain, but she has some really good motives. Like she's not like a mustache twirling evil baby eating villain. She is trying to gain power for herself, but that's specifically because she's trying to protect the kingdom from what she sees as a huge problem. She foresees a lot of trouble coming. She thinks that giving everybody the chance to vote, whether they know anything or not, whether they know how to read or not, whether they are aware of the realities of government or not, is a dangerous idea that's basically handing over the kingdom to a mob. And so she is trying to change things, not because she delights in oppressing peasants, but because she genuinely thinks that the only way to save their nation is to return rule to a stable central power. And so she's doing kind of really awful things in order to accomplish that. And it is the kind of thing that we living in a democratic society just assume is inherently evil. But given a lot of the realities that she is working under, it might actually be the best plan. So anyway, I really love the richness of the politics in the Sarmatian Commonwealth. So that's one of the really cool things about this chapter. Also, and let's skip ahead to, I'm just going to find the little, boop, 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 boop. Where is the, I wanted to find the sorcery here, and I can't find the sorcery in Sarmatian Commonwealth. So I don't know why I can't find this. I'm just going to click through and we will find it that way. What do you say? So it has a lot of kind of neat things. It has all the same kind of stuff here that we're talking about, where here's a description of what the town is like. Here's all the places. Here's all the people. Can you please just show me the sorcery? Here we go. Now we're talking about sorcery. Okay? Sandaris? I don't know. Whatever. The sorcery here is really cool. What you are seeing here is kind of, in this image, this is what the sorcery is like. Here's a mortal person making a deal with a spiritual being. And so it starts with the first deal. The sorcerers are called the Losajai, and they are trying to make a deal with the Diavas. And that first deal grants them power, but the Diavas will only give power if you do something. And that might be as simple. One of the examples they give in here is in 2 years' time, someone named George is going to ask you a question, and you have to say yes. And that's it. That doesn't seem like it's going to be a horrible thing. And so you say, okay, I will take that deal. And then you gain access to really cool magical powers. And then 2 years down the line, George shows up. And maybe he says, hey, can I have your shoes? And you say yes. And then you're done. Or maybe George says, hi, can I marry your firstborn child? And you have to say yes. And if you don't, you will lose all your magic, and this supernatural monster will be able to come after you and do horrible things to you because you just broke your deal with it. And then you get to make increasingly terrible deals. And every deal you get, every deal you make with them is going to give you more and more power until you get to the 7th deal. The 7th deal is the one that is going to grant that supernatural being full access to our world. They leave their other world and they enter the mortal realm. And maybe as soon as they enter, they're going to destroy your entire city. That actually happened to one of these Sarmatian Commonwealth locations that we skipped over. If you, I was clicking through and you saw like a giant pillar of flame, that was a city that was destroyed by one of these Dievas. Now, maybe on the other hand, that supernatural being is going to come in and then immediately disappear, and you don't know where they are. You don't know what that Dievas is going to do when it enters the mortal world. But your job as the Losagai, as the sorcerer, is to make enough deals that you can bring that supernatural being over and then kill it. Because they are all 201 evil supernatural monsters that are trying to wreak havoc in the mortal world. And so in order to gain access to them, in order to make them approachable and attackable and killable, you have to give them access to our world. So it's this really, I mean, I really love this take on a devil's bargain, right? That I'm going to gain incredible powers because I've made a deal with a monster, and then I'm going to have to give that monster power, and I'm going to have to do things for that monster in order to get all this power. And then once I bring it into the world, it can go around wreaking havoc while I hunt it down and try to kill it. And then as soon as I do kill it, I lose all my magic powers. So it is a very tension-filled magic system where everything that you gain comes with some horrible sacrifice. Something you're allowing to happen, something you're giving up, something you are actively putting into the world through the deals that you make. I really, really like this magic system that the Losagai have. And you can also see that it is filled with role-playing opportunities as well. It's not just, okay, you hit level 3, now you have Fireball, or whatever. It's, okay, you have a chance to talk to this monster again, and you will gain new powers if you are willing to do something horrible for it. And then you could have some scenarios, some adventures that are, you know, a couple episodes, couple sessions of your campaign could be fulfilling the deal that this thing has made and trying to mitigate the disastrous effects as much as possible. And then, you know, once you get to the point where you've made that 7th deal, then obviously your campaign at that point becomes, well, I need to hunt this thing down, or maybe I need to try to save this other thing before I hunt it down, because once I finally kill it, I'm going to lose all my powers. So there's just a lot of wonderful, really cool storytelling opportunities built into this magic system, and I love it. So anyway, Sarmatian Commonwealth is super cool and interesting. Let's have a look at Usura. So there's a dude with some birds, and there's some kids. So this is the Russian one. And, you know, just like everything else, it has the, you know, it has the overview. One of the interesting things about the overview is the Crescent Empire, and this is why I say that Usura, while it is kind of sort of based on Russia, it's also kind of sort of based on Hungary. Hungary was, for a long time, colonized and ruled for a few hundred years by Turks, by the Ottoman Empire. And so a lot of their architecture is based on those, you know, medieval ideas, and a lot of their religion is influenced by that. A lot of their food is influenced by that. And you can see that in Usura as well. The Crescent Empire is kind of this Middle Eastern thing, and they have their own book, and I hope to get to that eventually. Though I don't own it, and I'm very sad. I'm going to be buying it, don't worry. So there's a lot of influence there in Usura, and there's a little bit in the Sarmatian Commonwealth as well, but Usura has more. So anyway, hooray for that. And then they also have the Khazari, which are like the Cossacks. They're the Mongolians, sort of. They're the people of the steppes. So you go far enough east, just like when we talked about Conan, and there was Hyperborea, which is the Russian one, and a lot of it was just snowy forests and fortresses. But then the further east you go, you get into steppes. It's the exact same thing here with Usura. There's a lot of snowy mountains and fortresses and things, but you get out east and you get into these vast Asian steppes with, horse cultures and all of that kind of stuff over there. So anyway, Usura, it's really interesting. I love it a lot. They've got some really fascinating people in there. It's a very class-based system. One of their cool things is the former Tsar was stabbed with an icicle, and nobody knows who did it. And so here's just a little quick sidebar saying, here's kind of all the major players, up to and including Matushka, who's their Baba Yaga figure. Maybe she stabbed the guy with an icicle. It's totally her MO, so who knows? Let's talk about the sorcery, because that is, I think, the most interesting thing to get into here in Usura. There's all the people, there's all the story hooks, there's all the locations and secret societies, same thing that there is in every chapter. But let's take a look here at Tura. So there is a big description of Matushka, right? And Dar Matushki, which are the people who follow them. And there's a description in here that I really like, because Matushka and Tura are like the two, the grandmother and the grandfather spirits, and they try to help people. They try to change people. And in fact, I'm going to read this thing to you here, this paragraph. It says, a woman had two daughters, one beloved and one despised. One day the woman sent her despised daughter out into the snow to gather berries. As the daughter despaired over her task, she met and gave kindness to an old woman. Sorry, my camera's right in front of my thing. She returned home with berries and gold beside. The next day the woman sent out her beloved daughter, certain the girl would earn an even better prize. But the girl was cruel to the old woman and returned home with snakes twisted around her arms. The snakes squeezed and pinched her just like she did to her sister. The girl vowed to make amends once she did, and for as long as she remained merciful, the snakes were hers to command. That is Matushka in a nutshell, right? She is going to punish you for the things you did wrong and then reward you when you do things right. And there is actually a lot. There is a ton of information, several pages in here that are dedicated to exactly how Matushka's magic works, what kinds of people she tries to teach lessons to, what lessons she teaches. And in fact, most of her spells and the sorcery things you can gain are called lessons. And so it's this kind of idea. You used to be a bad person and she sent snakes to torment you. But while you remain a good person and you do the things Matushka wants you to do, the snakes are yours to command, right? And that's how a lot of her magic works. And so as long as you learn the right lessons, you have access to this really cool power. Now, there's another part in here, and I don't know exactly where it says this, but it describes the difference. Oh, where are we? Where's Tura? Come here, Tura. There we go. It describes the difference between Tura and Matushka by saying that both of them are trying to teach you. And the example it uses is a cake. So, if Matushka is going to teach you how to do a cake, she is going to show you what you need. She is going to tell you exactly how to do it. How much flour, how many eggs, how much milk, how long do you beat them, how hot is the oven, how long do you leave it in the oven. All of these rules are very specific, and if you follow them exactly, you will have a cake. And if you don't follow them exactly, you won't, and she'll punish you. Okay? That's how Matushka works. Tura, in contrast, is much more kindly and much more hands-off, but also just as demanding in the end. He is going to give you all of the material you need, every ingredient, all of the equipment, everything you need to make a cake. And then he's going to just let you do whatever you want. And at the end, if you don't have a cake, then he's coming down hard. So both of them are very demanding, and both of them are very helpful, but they have very different methods. Matushka is going to be very strict and very fierce. Tura is going to be very kind of laid back and hands-off, which makes a lot of people think that he's nicer, but he's still going to demand that cake Plus, he didn't teach you how to make it. You have to learn all of that on your own. So they both are able to offer you magic, and they both are able to offer you different kinds of magic, but they demand different things out of it, and for different reasons. One of the other things is that Tura is terrified of Matushka, and so he actually hides in a mountain, and he pretends to be the demon Chernobog. If you're familiar with Disney's Fantasia and Night on Bald Mountain and the great big demon that rises up out of the mountain, that's Chernobog. He pretends to be him, because he knows that Matushka is going to just let the demon be. But if Matushka ever finds out that it's actually Tura, she's going to come after him and there's going to be a big fight. So, anyway, really interesting magic system, and I love it. Speaking of interesting magic systems, it's time to talk about vodachi. Okay? Really cool art here, as some women are going to stab each other to death. Vodachi, like I said, is one of the most interesting, and it is definitely the most unique of the cultures in all of Theah, but it is also problematic in some ways and tricky to use in some ways. And basically what that all boils down to is the gender parity that does not exist. One of the things that 7th Sea is very clear about from the beginning, as soon as you get into the core book, it says, you know, all of the genders are equal and all of the ethnicities are equal, right? That there are men, there are women, there are transgender, there are non-binary, there is whatever you want, and everyone is free to be whatever they want. And also, there is no real form of racial discrimination, that every nation has white people and brown people and black people and every other color in between, and they are all treated equally. And that is one of the things that I like about the system. That's one of the things that a lot of people love about the system, is that your character can reflect who you are without these kind of bonds of racism or misogyny or, you know, all of the kind of cultural baggage that we deal with and struggle with in our society. They've just kind of thrown all that out and said, anyone can be anything. Done. That is not true in vodachi. It is the one type of sorcery, strega, that is restricted by gender. Only women can do it. And because of that, it has a culture that is incredibly stratified by gender, in which women are incredibly oppressed. They are second-class citizens. Basically, strega is so powerful that the men in the society have decided that the only way to kind of maintain the freedom that they want to have is to oppress the women to the point that they don't know how to read, that they don't have skills of their own, that they cannot help themselves. And this is aided by the nature of strega as sorcery, because it is impossible to use strega to help yourself long term. You can only help other people. And so that has created this kind of oppressed class, not just of the magic women, but of all women in general. It is fascinating, honestly. It is a really intriguing society. What they have created, I think, holds together. It would be interesting to read a book set in this world. It would be interesting to play a game set in this world. But if it bothers you that here's this, you know, horrific oppression of women, then you're not going to enjoy it. And that is kind of baked into the society, and there's no way around it. There are certainly rules in there for if you want to be a strega sorceress and you don't want to deal with all of that crap, then there are rules of, you know, how you can train yourself, how there's an entire secret society dedicated to smuggling strega sorcerers out of vodachi so that they can just live free lives in the rest of Theah. And so there's absolutely ways to do that. There's ways to get around this. But if you are going to play anything in vodachi itself, then you have to deal with this oppression, with this sexism and misogyny that is kind of part and parcel of their society. That is not necessarily a bad thing. You can absolutely play within those bounds and there's a lot of cool opportunities to destroy that oppressive system. And that could be a very fun and satisfying thing that some groups would want to do, is kind of play out the campaign that overthrows this oppressive culture. Um, but I just bring this up because I know that it's not for everybody. And I know that there are some people who are going to be like, you could create any world you wanted. Why did you create one in which I am horribly oppressed again? And if that bothers you, then you need to know going in that that's a part of vodachi. That said, there are a lot of Strega sorcerers who are incredibly powerful. One of them has become the Queen of Usura. Um, Usura or Sarmatian Commonwealth? One of the, I don't remember which one it is. Oh, it's Sarmatian Commonwealth. She is the crown princess, I think. I don't know what she is. Anyway, there's still a lot of opportunities there. There's a lot of opportunities for adventure, a lot of opportunities for horrifying comeuppance of these creepy princes that keep the women oppressed. Like, if you want to do the vengeance campaign, if you want to do that, it's there. I really think that vodachi is, I mean, it's like I introduced it. It is a fascinating but very problematic country. And so the options are there. One of the things that worries me a little bit about it is that they can't really commit to their own world in a way. So, for example, this picture here, when it talks about dueling, this is a woman who is a duelist. There are no female duelists in vodachi. Like, they're pretty clear about how it is super illegal to teach women how to fight in the kingdom. And yet, in their art, they still throw these in because it's just a really tricky thing to get around. It's a really kind of annoying system to have to work with. And so I find it interesting that even their own artists are like, yeah, I know that this is against the rules, but I'm going to do it anyway because I like it. So anyway, for me and for my play group, this is absolutely something that we would play with and that we would deal with and that we would find ways to redeem, right? There have to be monsters in order for there to be heroes. And I do think that that is a part of storytelling. But while I do personally recommend it, and I think that there are really great things that can be done with vodachi, the reason that I give all this spiel is because I know there's going to be people out there who just don't and who think that it is gross or offensive and aren't going to want to deal with it. So anyway, now you know and you can make an informed decision. Overall, this book is wonderful. I really enjoy 7th Sea as a game system, as a game world. I think that Theah is really well developed, astonishingly well developed. And like I said, developed in such a way that it is always clear how to use them as games, how to tell stories, how to do adventures, how to do all of this stuff in the game world. On top of that, it's just a really great system in the first place that's very unique. It's very swashbuckling and storytelling based. And I love it a lot. So anyway, 7th Sea, Nations of Theah Volume 2. Like I said, I like this one even better than I like the Volume 1. That has a lot of really great stuff in it, and I recommend it to you highly. So anyway, thank you very much. I'm Dan Wells, and you're awesome. Bye.